Now, what's the first thing that comes to mind when someone mentions the Five Nights at Freddy's series? Is it the dark and dingy filled atmospheres of the games? Maybe it's the stress-inducing quick gameplay loop? Or the terrifying horrors that slowly inch towards the player over the course of a night? No? Then what else could you possibly be thinking of? Freddy in Space is the name of a trilogy, of the time that I'm making this video, of official spin-off games developed for the Five Nights at Freddy's series, all created individually by Scott Cawthon. These games are famously known for their outlandish story, contained outside of the main series of games, meta commentary, and retro-like side-scrolling gameplay. For this video, I wanted to look back at each of the 3 games in the Freddy in Space series, covering each game's basic premise, the actual gameplay involved in each title, and what each installment offered to the series as a whole. On April Fool's Day of 2016, a teaser for the next game in the Five Nights at Freddy's series was revealed. Oops, never mind. This is a teaser for the 57th installment in the Five Nights at Freddy's series, titled Freddy in Space. Except, well, it seemed we'd be waiting a while for this one to come out. With the release of FNAF World's second update, also referred to as the Halloween update, players could visit Backstage, where they could play various quote-unquote terrible spin-off games, and unlock very strong characters to defeat the final boss. In FNAF 57, titled Freddy in Space, you play as Freddy Fazbear, sporting his FNAF World adventure iteration in a side-scrolling platform shooter fighting against an evil version of Scott Cawthon, who immediately greets the player saying that this game isn't finished yet. I mean, after all, it is the 57th installment. Tasked with taking him down before he can create any more FNAF-themed spin-offs, all the player needs to do is reach his hideout and finally defeat him. However, this isn't as easy as it seems. Freddy has to go around and defeat the many obstacles that come in his path, including but not limited to the small wind-up mice, security cameras that shoot lasers, these blue variations of FNAF World's rots, flans, and seaweeds, and this thing, which, funnily enough, first appeared in one of Scott Cawthon's old Christian animations, specifically in the 5th episode of the Jesus Kids Club, a DVD series made by Scott in 2010, along with what appears to be the same small wind-up mice found in this minigame. Completing the level normally grants the player with Jack O'Bonney on their FNAF World roster. However, you may have noticed these cupcakes around the minigame's map that give the player a slightly better weapon each time they're gathered. Finding all 9 of these hidden cupcakes will give the player both the final upgrades for their weapon and unlocks Purple Guy as a playable character. But don't be mistaken, this is not the Purple Guy, it's just a sprite. But what happens when you don't get any of the cupcakes, like at all? While this is quite challenging, the reward for finishing the game and not obtaining a single cupcake is Coffee, the main protagonist of The Desolate Hope, another one of Scott's older projects he'd made and released in 2012. The reason we see these characters in his old DVD series is likely due to the game taking 2 years to fully develop. He probably just plopped them in there. And just while we're at it, this entire minigame seems to take a majority of its gameplay and style from The Desolate Hope itself. I mean, the controls are exactly the same, the backgrounds look very similar, and the majority of the enemies found in Freddy in Space and the robot toys from the Jesus Kids Club also make appearances here. Even the security cameras themselves share strong resemblances. Considering all of this, the first installment in the Freddy in Space series is still pretty bare bones compared to the rest of this trilogy. Wait, did I just say the first installment and trilogy? Doesn't that mean there's more? That's right, with every masterpiece comes its successor. Before the game's trailer was officially dropped on us, we had gotten an ominous looking teaser, simply reading the number 58. But when brightened up, it reveals small comments that seem to be reviewing a new FNAF game, with even one Reddit user saying that they stopped caring after Dream Theory. Definitely a Reddit user, that's for sure. Anyway, yes, this was in fact teasing the legendary Freddy in Space 2, not FNAF 58. That's reserved for Poopits in Space, of course. The second teaser is, Oh my. This looks a little different from what we got before. Fun fact, this is where we got our first really good look at Security Breach's Roxanne Wolf, a character who'd been teased before in a very harsh silhouette. This was also, funnily enough, taken down from Scott's website shortly after, for being a bit too, let's say, risque. Well, disregarding that, we finally get to Freddy in Space 2. And that teaser before truly did show off the game's unique art style and departure from its previous title. In fact, the entirety of the game looks like this, all drawn up by Pinky Pills. Yeah, her. Freddy in Space 2 is another side-scrolling platform shooter, but has a lot more depth to it, unlike the last game. For a start, there's now more than one playable character, including the likes of Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, the puppet, and Golden Freddy as a secret character, with each character having their own unique abilities. While Freddy attacks in the same way he did in the previous game, Bonnie has a gun that shoots 3 rays of musical notes, Chica launches cupcakes, Foxy has a short flamethrower-like gun, the puppet uses a shield of gift boxes, and Golden Freddy shoots out the message, "It's me." Other than this, there are different levels, bosses in those same levels, numerous Easter eggs and references, a fully fledged leveling up system, and thankfully, slightly better controls, even later implementing settings for these same controls. When loading up the game, you're immediately met with the story, where the logarithmic, online, land-compatible, zero-error hydraulic auxiliary xylophone, or LOL's hacks, has kidnapped and brainwashed the rest of Freddy's friends and taken his son. It's mentioned that his son has very little time before his oxygen fully depletes. It's up to Freddy to safely rescue his friends and son in time before it's too late. In the game itself, the player can collect different gems and emeralds to earn money that gets progressively built up in the game's title and credit screen. If you haven't noticed by now, this game was designed as a way to bring awareness to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital fundraiser. Specifically, Scott created the currency in the game as a sort of gauge on how much money he'd donate to the charity through the progress made by MatPat, Steph, Markiplier, and Dawko on the dedicated Game Theory livestream on December 3rd of 2019. In fact, this is one of the very first things you see when booting up the game, along with the game being marked as a tribute to Skylar Ginn, a FNAF fan who tragically lost his battle with cancer in October of 2019 at the age of 12 years old. Rest in peace. In total, MatPat, Steph, Markiplier, and Dawko were able to obtain $450,000 in-game that Scott had obliged to donate to the foundation, but of course he simply rounded it up to $500,000 as his final donation. This, added on to the donations from the stream itself, totaled about $1.3 million to supporting St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which is just, wow. Jumping back to the game, all of the stages, being Lunar Mines, Galactic Factory, Cosmic Freeway, and Stellar Pit in those levels are centered entirely around one of Freddy's friends. At the start of each stage, you're greeted by Fredbear in a comm system who simply tells you which character you're here to rescue, where when approaching the end of the given level and defeating either stage's third boss will grant you the unlockable character and a results screen that totals the amount of money you'd earned in the level. While this game might seem practically identical to the first installment in the Freddy in Space series, there are some drastic improvements to its general gameplay, like with the incorporation of power-ups and a leveling system. Every time a new character levels up by collecting XP from either defeating enemies or from Lolbit, who acts as a shopkeeper in this game, they can individually upgrade their HP, luck stats, special attack damage, or chance for a critical hit. The luck stat and special attack damage goes into the game's use of power-ups as well, which can be obtained either by shooting mystery items scattered throughout the map, or by simply defeating enemies. These power-ups are very useful in defeating a lot of the game's bosses, but something tells me I've seen some of these somewhere. When your specific character levels up, their weapon also gets slightly stronger, and changes its appearance until it's capped at level 5. And if you know anything about Scott Cawthon, you'll know that there's got to be some secrets involved. In each of the given levels, players have the opportunity to find these purple portals that send them to a secret boss fight. These bosses are based on the YouTubers who were mainly involved in the Game Theory livestream, and defeating these difficult enemies grants the player a large sum of money for their final total, a trophy on the main menu, and a companion that assists the player throughout the rest of the game. These include BB's floating head, a golden Mr. Cupcake, a small Freddy in a biplane, and what looks to be a Reaper bite from FNAF World. In addition to these, players can also find secret golden microphones around the levels that add $10,000 each to their final total as well. When the player adds at least all 4 of the obtainable characters to their roster, LOL's Hacks' boss level opens up, with Fredbear telling the player that he's been severely weakened. You'd think this fight would be the end of the game. Okay, well, how about this one? Spoiler alert, it's not. The final iteration of LOL's Hacks takes this monstrous form, fit with laser pointer fingers, spikes that come out of the ground, and monitors that, also shoot lasers. While there's a pretty easy way to cheese this fight, it still took me around 5 minutes to actually fully defeat him, even with all the companions and being leveled up about 4 times with the best early character in the game. Anyway, after defeating the monstrous final stage of Lulz Hacks, he drops a golden cake that rewards the player with a staggering $100,000 added to the final total. After this, we finish our story with Freddy and his friends watching the sunset rise on this mysterious planet. But wait, what about his son? Remember him at the beginning of the game? Where'd he go? Well, in a dark twist of events, the only way to finish the game with Freddy's son present in the ending is by beating the final boss in under 30 minutes. Yeah, remember that oxygen limit that Lulz Hacks warned Freddy about? Well, guess it's at around the half-hour mark. Probably needs to be included somewhere in FNAF's darkest endings. In my opinion, the game's plethora of extra content to play is where the game truly shines. Remember that other character I haven't really talked too much about? Golden Freddy? Yeah, well, he's only able to be unlocked when the puppet breaks this specific box and retreats back to that level's boss arena. Brings me back to the FNAF 3 days. Did you know that you could also defeat the giant Mecha Chica that reigns through the Galactic Factory levels? Or defeat FNAF 58's evil Scott Cawthon, S. Cotton, as a boss hidden away in the contents of the game. There's a lot of cool replayability and content all packed into this charity-driven livestream game, and it's quite sad how it's largely ignored by the community when concerning FNAF's major game titles. I might go so far to admit that I enjoyed my playthrough of this game a teeny bit more than my playthrough of FNAF World. But that might just be me. Oh yeah, and the game has a kick-ass soundtrack that even references certain cues from FNAF World itself. Of course, all composed by series veteran Leon Riskin. Some were even used in later games in the series, like in Security Breach's Princess Quest arcade cabinets. Anyway, this sequel isn't the game that ends the Freddy in Space series just yet. Released to practically everyone's surprise on October 18th of last year, Freddy in Space 3 was actually officially announced under the title of FNAF, the movie, the game. But you could have probably guessed how many, including myself, felt about that when it first dropped. However, this was simply not the case. Under the title of Chica in Space, this time it's Chica's turn in the spotlight. The deep, emotional, and truly enriching story of this game involves a silhouetted figure explaining to Freddy and his friends about their reluctance to drop any more teasers for the upcoming Five Nights at Freddy's film. The same figure then quickly kidnaps all but Chica, and she's thrusted into defeating this force and rescuing her friends. In Freddy in Space 3, there's 9 levels in total that the player has to beat. Finishing the 2 levels in accordance with one another grants the player a new character that they can play as, being either Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, or Mangle, sadly excluding the puppet and Golden Freddy from the last game. Just like the sequel, the different characters also do slightly operate differently from each other, like how Foxy moves faster and jumps farther than the rest of the cast, just like he was in Freddy in Space 2, except in that game everybody moved at like the same speed. While every character here has the same basic shooting attack, they all are set with different special abilities. Like with Freddy, you can summon a Golden Freddy head that starts to chomp nearby enemies. Bonnie's ability gives him invulnerability inside a force field of musical notes. Chica just has a giant pizza she throws at people. Foxy just straight up turns into Nightmare Foxy. And Funtime Foxy's ability gives her spinning endoskeleton arms. All of these special abilities for each of these characters are only accessible after opening these lightning symbol chests found somewhere in the given map. Every character also has a passive ability, where the drop rates for either special damage boosts, gold, weapon damage boosts, or HP are slightly increased. Chica, unfortunately, doesn't get anything. The levels and enemies themselves are essentially all references to something from the Five Nights at Freddy's series. Some of my favorites include the entirety of Merch Cemetery, acting almost like a personal hell for forgotten, banished, or downright ugly Five Nights at Freddy's products. I talk a little bit more about these enemies specifically in my FNAF merch that exists in real life video, but the enemies present in this level are actual FNAF products, including the Freddy Fazbear Pillow Pet, Funko Neon Pink Blacklight Freddy plush, and Sanchi's official Chica mask. I also really enjoy the references to Freddy in Space 2, with the classic Yeevee spaceship, and the return of Lullbit as the shopkeeper, Buff Helpy, German Funtime Freddy,
Hello, little children.
Souldozer,
Impossible! You haven't seen the last of me! Well, Actually, yes, this is the last you'll see of me.
the party hat, and some other things. Going back to Lolbit, their shop has been changed from its original mechanic from Freddy in Space 2. Now players can use the coins they collect in the different levels to buy either new hats, weapons, or pets that can help the player out. On rare occasions, players can also find these after killing enemies or just around the map. Each new item gives the player a special upgrade, whether it's a trigger-happy set of exotic butters, a constant downpour of chocolate donuts, or a gun that shoots rapid swarms of bees. I also personally love the addition of a random FNAF trivia section and a level reminiscent of FNAF World's Chica's Magic Rainbow-like troll level. However, one of the most interesting parts about Freddy in Space 3 is that it wasn't actually originally designed as a traditional Freddy in Space game, but rather a game for Scott's kids. From a Reddit post by Big Al 0104, he noticed sprites still contained inside the game's internal files. Fans of Scott Cawthon's older titles may see the resemblance in some of his human characters to the game Doomsday Picnic, which in of itself has a lot of resemblance to the Freddy in Space series. These sprites range from the humans mentioned before to sentient pizza, flaming pokeballs, volcanoes, and a crude version of Dr. Doofenshmirtz and Perry the Platypus. From Scott's comment on this post, these characters were simply from properties that his kids were fond of, so he added them in the game. And sadly, we probably will never be able to play this original version that eventually became Freddy in Space 3. These sprite replacements also kinda happened with Freddy in Space 2, but in that game's case, the crude pixel art drawings were simply just placeholders for the finished art design, which was again done by Pinky Pills. After finishing the final boss of Freddy in Space 3, which by the way is a battle between Scott Cawthon himself and a sort of laser tag arena, Chica and the rest of her friends will be prompted with a sudden end screen. Well, I guess that's it. A bit anticlimactic, but that's okay. I guess it's a little better than Freddy in Space 2's bad ending. Hold on a sec. That's not just gibberish, is it? In fact, it's not. Inputting this code into a YouTube search tag lets players visit an unlisted YouTube video titled Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Security Footage under the official Universal Pictures YouTube channel. Now we're talking. This is where we got our first look at Shadow Freddy, the Missing Children's Incident Tape, which isn't included in the movie itself, Unwithered Foxy, which also isn't included in the movie, and gave us the best look at the new Spring Bonnie suit used by William Afton in the film. So I guess in a way, this really was FNAF the movie, the game. No? Okay. While the Freddy in Space series may have started off as a quote-unquote terrible spin-off that doesn't provide any lore significance, like, whatsoever, I think this series of games is pretty solid overall. At least for Freddy in Space 2, I think it's genuinely a pretty fun time, and think you should definitely at least give that one a try. While Freddy in Space 1 and 3 are fairly nice games, the first's tedious controls and the third's lack of any sort of replayability kinda kills it for me. One thing's for sure, the entire Freddy in Space series has some of the most underrated pieces of FNAF music regarding the entirety of the series. I mean, I've been playing them throughout the entirety of this video. All in all, I just think it's really cool to see Scott Cawthon kinda make a return to the games he'd used to make before the Five Nights at Freddy's series was even ever released. Seriously, he'd made like a little more than 70 games, with a lot of them being either RPGs or side-scrolling shooters. I like to think Scott specifically chose these formats for Freddy in Space to almost reattempt at perfecting some of his past games. Or maybe he's just a big fan of Metroid. Scratch that, he definitely is. While the Freddy in Space series only consists of the 3 games so far, there's no guarantee that this is where the series ends. The third installment of Freddy in Space was only released in October of last year, so maybe we'll see a 4th game sometime in the future. Maybe even under the title of FNAF, the movie, the game, 2. Or maybe Chica in Space 2? Or even FNAF 60? No, wait, that's for breakfast at Chica's. I don't even know at this point.